The evening of October 15th, 1957, was like any other Tuesday night at La Fontaine, one of Hollywood's most exclusive dining establishments. The restaurant sat on a quiet corner of Sunset Boulevard, its elegant French doors opening onto a world of crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and the soft glow of candlelight. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, aged wine, and simmering cocoa vin. A jazz quartet played in the corner, their music floating through the room like smoke from the cigarettes that seemed to be in every hand. This was the Hollywood of the 1950s, a time when elegance meant something, when dining out was an event, when the right restaurant could make or break a reputation. La Fontaine was that restaurant. Movie executives closed million-dollar deals over its Dover soul. Starlets were discovered at its bar. Marriages began and ended over its escargot. To dine at La Fontaine was to announce that you had arrived, that you mattered, that you belonged. The maitre d', a thin man named Philippe with a pencil mustache and an eye for wealth, stood at his podium surveying his domain with satisfaction. Every table was filled with Hollywood royalty, studio heads in their tailored suits, actresses in their evening gowns, producers smoking cigars and discussing their next pictures. This was Philippe's kingdom, and he ruled it with an iron fist wrapped in white gloves. At 7:15, the door opened. A man walked in alone, dressed in a simple gray suit, no tie, no entourage, no flash. He moved with an easy confidence, a slight smile playing at his lips, his dark hair combed back in a casual style. He looked around the restaurant with an expression of quiet pleasure, like someone coming home after a long trip. Philippe barely glanced at him. The man wasn't dressed ostentatiously enough, wasn't accompanied by anyone important. Didn't have that desperate look of someone trying to impress. Philippe made a small gesture to one of the waitresses, a young woman named Emma, indicating she should handle this walk-in. Emma had been working at La Fontaine for 6 months. She was 23, pretty in a sharp-featured way, and she learned quickly that in a place like this, you judge people by their appearance. The bigger the jewelry, the louder the entrance, the more demanding the attitude, the better the tip. This man in his simple gray suit and easy smile, Emma sized him up in 3 seconds and decided he was small potatoes. Probably someone's assistant or a small-time agent tried to rub shoulders with real success. She approached him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good evening," she said, her tone perfectly polite, but with an edge of condescension that only someone paying attention would catch. "Do you have a reservation?" "I don't," the man said, his voice warm and slightly amused. "But I was hoping you might have a table available." Emma glanced around the packed dining room and then back at him, letting her eyes travel over his simple attire with barely concealed judgment. "I'm afraid we're quite full this evening. La Fontaine requires reservations, especially for our better tables." She emphasized the word better, just enough to make her meaning clear. "I understand," the man said, still smiling. "Perhaps something in a quieter area? I'm not particular." Emma considered this. The restaurant was indeed full, but there was one table available, the small two-top in the back corner near the kitchen doors, the table they usually save for last-minute walk-ins or people they didn't particularly want to be seen. It was La Fontaine's equivalent of Siberia, a spot where the lighting was harsh. The kitchen noise was constant, and the view was of a blank wall. "Well," Emma said, drawing out the word, "we do have one table, but I should warn you, it's not our finest location, given the caliber of our establishment. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere else? There's a nice diner down the street." The suggestion hung in the air, insulting in its implication. The man's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes, a brief flash of recognition that he was being judged and found wanting. "The table in back will be fine," he said simply. "I'm just here for a good meal." Emma shrugged and led him through the restaurant. As they walked, other diners glanced up. A few faces showed flickers of recognition, eyes widening slightly. But Emma, focused on getting this mundane task over with, didn't notice. She seated him at the corner table with a perfunctory gesture, tossing the menu on the table rather than presenting it properly. "Your waiter will be with you shortly," she said, already turning away. "Actually," the man said gently, "I was hoping you might take my order. If you have time, of course." Emma turned back, suppressing a sigh. Great. Now she had to actually serve this nobody instead of just seating him. And moving on to more important tables, more generous tippers. Of course, sir, she said, pulling out her order pad with an expression that suggested this was a tremendous imposition. The man studied the menu for a moment, seemingly unbothered by the harsh lighting or the swinging kitchen door just feet away. The cocoa vin, please, he said, and a glass of your house red. Emma wrote this down with a barely perceptible smirk. House red, not even a proper bottle, not even asking about the wine list. This confirmed everything she'd thought about him. The house red, she repeated, her tone making it sound like he'd ordered water from the tap. Excellent choice, sir. She started to walk away, but the man spoke again. Emma, he said, reading her name tag. How long have you been working here? The question surprised her. She turned back, suddenly wary. Was he going to complain already? 6 months, she said shortly. Why? Just curious, he said, that easy smile still in place. It's a beautiful restaurant. You must enjoy working here. It's fine, Emma said, uncomfortable with this unexpected pleasantness. The clientele is usually very distinguished. The implication, of course, was that he was an exception to this rule. I'm sure, the man said, apparently missing or choosing to ignore the slight. Well, thank you, Emma. I appreciate your service. She walked away, shaking her head slightly. Some people just didn't get it. You came to La Fontaine to see and be seen, to flaunt your success, to make an impression. You didn't come and dress like a middle manager and order the house wine and act grateful for a table by the kitchen. This guy clearly didn't understand how Hollywood worked. At the next table over, a couple in their 50s, both dressed in expensive evening wear, had been watching this exchange with growing interest. The man leaned toward his wife and whispered something. She glanced at the man in the corner, her eyes widening, and then she whispered back urgently. They both looked again, more carefully this time, and the woman's hand went to her mouth in surprise. Emma, returning from placing the order, noticed their interest. She paused by their table. Is everything satisfactory? She asked. Do you know who that is? The woman asked, nodding toward the corner table. Emma glanced back. No, ma'am. A walk-in. No reservation. The couple exchanged glances. That's Dean Martin, the man said quietly. Emma felt her stomach drop. She looked again at the man in the corner. Really looked this time. And suddenly it clicked. The relaxed posture, the easy smile, the dark hair, the unmistakable features. Oh, God. Oh, no. That was Dean Martin. The Dean Martin. Singer, actor, one half of Martin and Lewis. One of the biggest stars in Hollywood. And she treated him like a nobody. She'd suggested he go to a diner. She'd given him the worst table in the restaurant. She'd been condescending and dismissive and insulting. Her face flushed hot. She looked around frantically, hoping maybe Philippe hadn't noticed, but the maitre d' was busy seating a party of 6 on the other side of the room. Maybe she could fix this. Maybe she could move him to a better table, apologize, make it right before anyone important realized what had happened. But it was too late, because walking toward the corner table with a wide smile and outstretched hand was the restaurant manager, Marcel, a portly Frenchman in his 60s who ran La Fontaine with precision and pride. And the expression on Marcel's face was one of pure delight. Dean! Marcel's voice carried across the restaurant, and suddenly every head turned. Mon ami, what are you doing hiding back here? Why didn't you tell Philippe you were coming? Dean Martin stood and shook Marcel's hand warmly. Hello, Marcel. I didn't want to make a fuss. I just wanted a quiet meal. A quiet meal? In the kitchen corner? Marcel looked genuinely distressed. This is unacceptable. Come, we'll move you to the center table, the best in the house. Marcel, Dean said, his voice gentle but firm, I'm fine right here. Really, the table is perfect. Marcel looked confused, and then his eyes traveled to Emma, who stood frozen nearby, her order pad clutched in white-knuckled hands. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by horror. Emma, he said slowly, did you seat Mr. Martin here? At this table? Emma couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The restaurant had gone quiet. The jazz quartet had finished their song and hadn't started another. Every diner, every waiter, every busboy was watching the scene unfold. "It's not our fault," Dean said quickly. I walked in without a reservation. "The restaurant is full. She found me a table. I'm grateful." But Marcel was shaking his head, his face reddening. "Mr. Martin, I must apologize profusely. If we had known you were coming, if anyone had recognized you, this never would have happened. Emma, how could you not recognize Mr. Martin?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't realize. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The weight of her mistake was crushing. This wasn't just Dean Martin, one of Hollywood's biggest stars. This was Dean Martin, who, she suddenly remembered hearing in staff gossip, was a silent partner in La Fontaine. He didn't just dine here. He owned the place, or at least owned part of it. She'd insulted and condescended to one of her own employers. The couple at the next table was whispering urgently. Across the room, a studio executive had his hand over his mouth, trying not to laugh. Word was spreading through the dining room like wildfire. The waitress didn't recognize Dean Martin. She gave him the worst table. She suggested he go to a diner. It was the kind of story that would be all over Hollywood by morning. Marcel was still apologizing profusely, his hands gesturing wildly in that French way of his. "Mr. Martin, please, let me move you to a proper table. The center table is open now. I can have it prepared immediately." Dean held up a hand, stopping Marcel mid-sentence. His expression was still calm, still friendly, but there was something else there now, a quiet authority, a presence that filled the space around him. "Marcel," he said, "I'm going to stay right here, but I would like to say something, if I may, to everyone." Marcel stepped back, nodding quickly. Of course. Dean looked around the restaurant, making eye contact with diners, with staff, with Philippe still standing at his podium looking mortified. When he spoke, his voice was conversational, not loud, but somehow it carried to every corner of the room. "I come to this restaurant a lot," he said. "Usually I call ahead. Usually Marcel knows I'm coming. But tonight, I wanted to just walk in like a regular person and have a meal. I wanted to see how it feels to be someone without a reservation, without a name everyone recognizes, without the red carpet treatment." He paused, that slight smile playing at his lips again. "And you know what? It was educational. Because Emma here, she looked at me and she made a judgment. She saw a man in a simple suit, alone, no fanfare, and she decided I wasn't important enough for the good tables. She decided I probably couldn't afford to be here. She was polite about it, professional even, but the message was clear. I didn't belong with the real Hollywood people. Emma wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Tears were pricking at her eyes, and she bit her lip hard to keep them from falling. "Now," Dean continued, "Emma's embarrassed. And I don't want that, because Emma didn't do anything that everyone in this room doesn't do every single day. We all judge people by what they're wearing, who they're with, how much money they seem to have. We decide who deserves our attention, our respect, our best tables. We create hierarchies based on fame and wealth and appearances." He turned to Emma directly. "You treated me the way you've been taught to treat people who don't look important. You gave me the service you thought I deserved based on my appearance. And that's not your fault, Emma. That's what this town teaches everyone. That's how Hollywood works. The famous get the best of everything. Everyone else gets what's left over." Emma was crying now, silent tears running down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know. I should have been kinder. I should have been better." Dean's expression softened. "Yes," he said simply, "you should have. Not because I'm Dean Martin. Not because I own part of this restaurant. You should have been kinder, because that's how human beings should treat each other. Every person who walks through that door deserves the same respect, the same courtesy, the same dignity. Whether they're a movie star or a construction worker, whether they're wearing diamonds or denim, whether everyone knows their name or nobody does." He looked around the restaurant again. "I learned a long time ago that fame is fleeting. Success is temporary. What matters, what lasts, is how you treat people. Especially people who can't do anything for you. Especially people who seem ordinary. Because everyone has a story. Everyone matters. And you never know who you're talking to until you take the time to actually see them. The silence in the restaurant was profound. Marcel stood with his hands clasped, nodding slowly. Philippe had left his podium and was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. The couple at the next table was holding hands, the woman dabbing at her face with her napkin. Dean turned back to Emma. "I'm not angry with you," he said gently. "I'm not going to have you fired. I'm not even going to ask Marcel to reprimand you. But I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember how you felt when you realized your mistake. And I want you to use that feeling every time you're tempted to judge someone by their clothes or their car or whether they have a reservation." Emma nodded, unable to speak. "Everyone in this room," Dean said, raising his voice slightly so everyone could hear, "we all need to be better. We need to treat the busboy with the same respect we give the studio head. We need to give the secretary the same smile we give the star. We need to remember that true class, real elegance, has nothing to do with money or fame. It has everything to do with kindness, with dignity, with recognizing the humanity in every person we meet." He sat back down at his corner table. "Now, Marcel, I believe I ordered the cocoa vin and a glass of house red, and I'm going to enjoy them right here at this table because there's nothing wrong with this spot. The lighting is good enough to see my food. The kitchen noise reminds me that hard-working people are making my meal. And the view of the wall is just fine because I came here for the company, not the scenery." Marcel nodded, his eyes shining. "Of course, Mr. Martin. Right away." He snapped his fingers at a hovering waiter. "Jean-Claude, Mr. Martin's order immediately. And bring him our finest Bordeaux, not the house wine." "The house wine is fine, Marcel," Dean interjected. "Please, Mr. Martin, allow me this." Dean smiled. "All right, the Bordeaux. Thank you." Emma still stood there, frozen, tears streaming down her face. Dean looked up at her. "Emma, are you going to be okay?" She nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. "I don't know what to say, how to apologize properly. I was so rude to you, so dismissive. I judged you and I was cruel and I'm so sorry. I accept your apology," Dean said, "and I appreciate it. But Emma, the person you really need to apologize to is yourself, because you compromised your own values tonight. You let this town's obsession with fame turn you into someone who treats people differently based on appearances. That's not who you want to be, is it?" Emma shook her head vehemently. No, it's not. I grew up in Ohio. My parents raised me to be kind to everyone. But I came here and I wanted to fit in, and I started acting like everyone else and I..." She broke off, sobbing. Dean stood and handed her his handkerchief, a simple white square of cloth from his pocket. "Hollywood changes people," he said quietly, "but you don't have to let it change you into someone you don't recognize. You can be kind. You can be respectful. You can treat everyone with dignity. It won't make you less successful. It'll make you more human." Emma took the handkerchief and pressed it to her face. When she looked up, her eyes were red but determined. "I'll be better," she said. "I promise. I'll remember this. I'll remember you. And I'll treat every single person who walks through that door like they matter. Because they do." "They do," Dean agreed. He sat back down. "Now, I'm going to have my dinner. And you're going to take a moment to collect yourself. And then you're going to get back to work. And tomorrow, you're going to be a better version of yourself than you were today. That's all any of us can do." Emma nodded, clutching the handkerchief. She walked toward the back, toward the staff area, and Marcel followed her to make sure she was all right. Jean-Claude appeared with Dean's meal and the Bordeaux, setting both down with a formal bow. "Mr. Martin, your cocoa vin." "Thank you, Jean-Claude," Dean said, and the warmth in his voice, the genuine appreciation, made the waiter stand a little straighter. Slowly, the restaurant began to come back to life. The jazz quartet started playing again, a soft, melancholy tune. Conversations resumed, though they were quieter now, more thoughtful. Several diners approached Dean's table to introduce themselves, to shake his hand, to thank him for what he'd said. He greeted each one with that same easy smile, that same genuine warmth. The couple from the next table came over. Mr. Martin, the man, said, "That was one of the most gracious things I've ever witnessed. You could have had that girl fired. You could have made a scene. Instead, you taught all of us a lesson." "I didn't do anything special," Dean said. "I just said what needed to be said. We all forget sometimes that other people have feelings. We all forget that kindness costs nothing." The woman was crying. "My husband and I, we came to Hollywood 20 years ago. We both wanted to be actors. We washed dishes and waited tables and got rejected at 1,000 auditions. And people treated us terribly because we weren't anybody. We were just two kids with dreams. We swore if we ever made it, we'd never treat people that way. But sometimes we forget. Tonight you reminded us." Dean reached out and squeezed her hand. "Don't forget again," he said gently. "That's the only thing that matters. Not the roles you get or the money you make. How you treat people. That's the legacy you leave." Philippe approached, his face stricken. "Mr. Martin, I must apologize as well. I should have recognized you. I should have ensured you received proper treatment." Dean shook his head. "Philippe, you run a good restaurant. You seat hundreds of people every week. You can't recognize everyone. And that's fine. What matters is that everyone you seat, whether you know them or not, gets treated with basic human decency. Can you do that?" Philippe nodded solemnly. "Yes, Mr. Martin. I can. I will." "Good," Dean said. "Then we're fine." As the evening wore on, Dean finished his meal in that corner table, the worst seat in the house. He ate his coq au vin slowly, savoring each bite. He sipped his Bordeaux and listened to the jazz quartet. He chatted with the diners who stopped by his table. He left a generous tip for Jean-Claude and a note for Emma, written on a napkin. "Remember who you are. Remember what you stand for. Hollywood needs more people like that." Dean, when he left La Fontaine that night, he shook Marcel's hand, thanked Philippe, waved the kitchen staff. He walked out the same way he came in, quietly, without fanfare. But the restaurant he left behind was different from the one he'd entered. The staff was different. The diners were different. Something had shifted. Emma came back to work the next day. She walked in early, before her shift, and found Marcel in his office. "I wanted to thank you for not firing me," she said. Marcel looked up from his paperwork. "Mr. Martin said you weren't to be punished, and I agree with him. You made a mistake, Emma, but we all make mistakes. The question is what we do after." "I'm going to be better," Emma said. "I'm going to treat everyone with respect, no matter who they are or what they look like." "Good," Marcel said, "because that's what La Fontaine should be about. Not just good food, but good service. Real service. The kind that sees every person as valuable." Emma worked at La Fontaine for another 30 years. She became the head waitress, then the floor manager. She trained dozens of new staff members, and she told every single one of them the story of the night Dean Martin walked in without a reservation and she didn't recognize him. She told them about the lesson he taught her, about how she judged him and been wrong, about how he'd been gracious and kind even when he had every right to be angry. "Remember," she would say to the new hires, "you never know who you're serving, and it doesn't matter who they are. Everyone deserves your best. Everyone deserves kindness. Everyone deserves to be treated like they matter, because they do." Dean Martin continued to dine at La Fontaine regularly. Sometimes he called ahead. Sometimes he just walked in, and wherever Emma seated him, whether it was the best table in the house or that corner spot by the kitchen, he smiled and thanked her and treated her like she was the most important person in the room. The story of that night spread through Hollywood, as stories do. It became one of those legendary tales that people told at parties, in writers' rooms, on movie sets. The night Dean Martin walked into his own restaurant and nobody recognized him. The night he got the worst table in the house. The night he turned a moment of embarrassment into a lesson about human dignity. Some versions of the story exaggerated Emma's rudeness. Some versions made Dean's response more dramatic. But the core truth remained. A famous man had been judged by his appearance, treated with contempt, And instead of seeking revenge or retribution, he'd chosen to teach. To remind everyone that fame and wealth don't determine worth. That kindness matters more than status. That the measure of a person is how they treat those who could do nothing for them. It was a very Hollywood story in many ways. The glamour of La Fontaine, the jazz quartet, the crystal chandeliers, the movie stars at every table. But it was also a profoundly un-Hollywood story. Because Hollywood, then and now, runs on hierarchies. On who's hot and who's not. On who gets the good table and who gets shuffled to the back. Dean Martin that night challenged all of that. He insisted that everyone deserved the same basic respect, regardless of where they fell in the hierarchy. Years later, when Dean Martin passed away on Christmas Day in 1995, Emma sent flowers to his funeral. She included a note, "You changed my life that night in 1957. You taught me what real class looks like. It's not about the clothes you wear or the table you sit at. It's about the kindness you show. Thank you for that lesson. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for treating a foolish young waitress with more dignity than she'd shown you. I never forgot. I never will." The story endures because it speaks to something universal. We all judge people. We all make assumptions based on appearances. We all treat some people better than others. And occasionally, we all need to be reminded that everyone we meet is fighting their own battles, carrying their own dreams, deserving of basic human respect. Dean Martin could have destroyed Emma's career that night. One word from him and she had been fired, blacklisted, unable to work in any decent Hollywood restaurant. But he didn't want revenge. He wanted something harder and more valuable. He wanted to teach. He wanted to change hearts. He wanted to make people think about how they treated others. That's the real legacy of October 15th, 1957. Not the embarrassment of a young waitress. Not the drama of a Hollywood moment. But the quiet, powerful reminder that true elegance is silent. That real fame doesn't announce itself. That respect should never depend on who someone appears to be. In a town built on surfaces, Dean Martin insisted on depth. In an industry obsessed with status, he championed dignity. In a moment when he could have been petty, he chose to be profound. That corner table in La Fontaine became, for one night, the most important spot in all Hollywood. Not because a famous man sat there, but because a wise man taught a lesson there. A lesson about class, about kindness, about treating every human being as if they matter. Because they do. They always have. They always will. That's what Dean Martin knew. That's what he showed us. That's what that night at La Fontaine was really about. And that's a lesson worth remembering.